free soloing. It's such a mental game. It's perfection or death. I've known Alex for 10 years and I've climbed with him all over the world. His climbing 1,000 feet off the ground with no rope, it is pure.
Here's a human pushing all of the limits and pushing himself. It's almost showing the essence of the greatness of what we can all be.
He is able to control his mind and say, I'm going to play the perfect game. He told us that he wanted to free solo El Cap. And I was like, I don't know if we can make that film.
Why did you say that?
As a filmmaker, you're accountable. I knew what the burden would feel like, that someone could die on your watch. You're on a 3,000-foot wall, swinging around for hours on end. One mistake could be catastrophic. It's hard to say if I'd ever be able to look through a camera again. You have to film when you least want to film. In this day and age, it's like hard to be present. Nobody knows what is real anymore, but this is real. Physically, the climbs could be really difficult, but not letting your mind slip. That is the superpower, that is the challenge. Nobody's ever achieved anything great being happy and cozy. You have to face your fear, you have to overcome your own instincts.
They say that the human race is doomed, that we have lost touch with our true nature, that the media has corrupted us, and that the planet has no future. I disagree. I believe that humanity is full of hope, and that our salvation lies within each one of us. My name is Brian Rose, and my job is to listen, the oldest method of learning known to man. Each week I seek out individuals that are changing the world, people who are living and thinking in a different way. Their stories will challenge your beliefs, make you question your choices, and perhaps inspire you to change. I never planned on doing any of this, but now I can't stop. Join me on this mission and make humanity something we can all be proud of.
If you're into climbing, then we've got a big treat for you this week because Jimmy Chin is in the house, and he is an award-winning photographer, filmmaker, and climber who's been working with Nat Geo for many, many years. You might remember him from a documentary film called MERU, where he climbed the Shark's Fin, which is this really hairy peak where him and his crew nearly died on the way up. It was really an amazing film. But now Jimmy is back to talk about his latest directorial debut, which is a film called Free Solo, which chronicles Alex Honnold, the free climber's trek up a 3,000-foot face called El Capitan in Yosemite with no ropes. This movie has just won the BAFTA here for Best Documentary Film. I got to see the premiere and meet Alex Honnold, and it's a masterpiece. And Jimmy sat down and talked to me about what it was like to make this film, what it was like to be a climber, what it was like to know Alex, and how this thing, it's just this weird piece of perfection that they caught on camera, and how hard it was to catch something when your best friend could die at any moment during the filming of the piece. This is heavy stuff, but Jimmy is such a cool, calm, collected Midwestern dude. He makes it look like it's nothing, but he really is an amazing filmmaker and amazing climber. So I know you're gonna enjoy this episode. I was totally loving everything that's gonna happen. And the word is that they'll probably get the Academy Award for Best Documentary, and I really wish them well. So sit back and enjoy Jimmy Chin. And over here at London Real, we're busy trying to get you to be a podcaster. And that's what we do inside the Academy with our Broadcast Yourself course. You will have 8 episodes on iTunes of your podcast within 8 weeks. I love teaching this stuff. Here's a little bit more about what we do inside.
London Real doesn't stop when the conversation ends. You see, that's when we get started. Because everything begins with a thought, and then comes the action. The London Real Academy is our global transformation platform. Here we bring together thousands of students from over 75 countries. Whether you want to build a profitable business from your passion, or learn to speak to inspire, or broadcast yourself with your very own podcast, or accelerate your life to become a high-performance person, we have the online accountability course and personal mentoring program that will make your dream a reality. Join us, and we'll take your life to the next level, together. Our next accelerator course is starting soon.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jimmy Chin, the award-winning filmmaker, photographer, and mountain sports athlete who has documented dozens of expeditions for National Geographic and the North Face. In 2006, you were part of the first American team to climb and then ski down the summit of Mount Everest. And in 2011, you made the first ever ascent of the 20,000-foot Himalayan peak known as the Shark's Fin, which became MERU, the award-winning documentary film. Your latest movie, Free Solo, which you co-directed with your wife, Chai Vasarhelyi, features Alex Honnold climbing without ropes the 3,000-foot granite wall known as El Capitan. You're smiling a bit there. I recently saw the film. I met Alex, I met your wife, I met one of your daughters. Jimmy, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome having you here. What's it been like the last 5 months? Because you've been on a 5-month tour talking about this movie. You watched this thing go from something you didn't know what it was going to be to where now it's been nominated by BAFTA. It's on IMAX. It's right now in 30-some theaters in London for a documentary film. What's this last few months been like for you?
It's been a pretty wild ride, for sure. You know, because you never know how your film is going to land with audiences. And so we've been more than pleasantly surprised by how it's been received by people, and just the reactions of audiences has been amazing. I mean, you, as a filmmaker, you can't really ask for much more, you know. But it has been a pretty intense 5 months because we premiered at Telluride Film Festival, and then went straight into Toronto, and then went straight into the release of the film in the US. And so you're just kind of doing press and promoting the film and kind of moving with it for months now. And you're just traveling, you know, and moving around. But it's been really exciting, you know.
What's the reaction been like? What's the typical reaction you get from someone who's maybe a non-climbing fan?
Definitely the most typical thing I hear is that my palms were sweating the entire time. I've heard that probably thousands of times, and which is funny. Like, people literally have like this, you know, physical reaction to the film, yeah. And but also that people are connecting with the story, with, you know, kind of the love story and Alex's, you know, journey, as well as, you know, Alex being a really inspiring person. But the climbing, you know, for sure, the free solo is, I think, really hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around until they see it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I like to think I'm kind of a tough guy, but I was there like front row, and I mean, I was doing kind of this thing that you used to do when you're a kid, you know? And yeah. I was like, I can handle this. But it was really getting my physicality motoring,
yeah.
You know, on the final part of the movie, which is the climb, which has been built up, you know, for a good year process. I know it was even more behind the scenes, yeah. But it is, and of course, you know, he's going to make it.
Yes.
And yet I'm still there. It's almost the ultimate human connection, right?
Yeah, well, it's also, as a filmmaker, it's like the ultimate suspension of disbelief. Like when people know the ending, and even at screenings where they know Alex is going to be doing a Q&A afterwards, to be able to kind of bring people into a film to that degree is, really your goal, is to bring people into a story, is to transport people into a world that they didn't know existed, or, really kind of move people. And so we're very proud of that. We're really happy that it's, the film works on that level. And, there's also a certain satisfaction going in and watching audiences during the free solo.
Is it true you and Alex just come in for the last 10 minutes?
We always we like to come in for the last 15 minutes and watch.
And what do you
especially
see?
now on IMAX, because it's really, the IMAX experience is really mind-blowing for Alex and I both, because I think it's the first time we've ever been able to share climbing in a way where you actually feel like you're there. It's the closest you can get to being there, I think, is to see it on IMAX.
Okay, because you've been there, you're on those faces.
Yeah, when it feels, when I'm watching it on IMAX, it feels like I feel when I'm up there, it's like, it's so immersive. And so that's been really exciting. We re-released IMAX, I don't know, like 14 or 15 weeks into our theatrical release. So, we've been traveling and seeing it on screens, but, months into the release, we're kind of back into it. And it's been exciting to see it on I saw it on the Waterloo IMAX screen last night. And I think that's the biggest IMAX screen in the UK, and it was awesome.
Yeah. I was watching this whole part of the film where Alex does this karate kick, and I was just watching it a few minutes ago, and obviously I feel this tension and feel my palpitation, but I was asking, why is this so fascinating to me? And I'm just guessing that the reason people connect with this film is because here's a human here pushing all of the limits and pushing himself to accomplish something that doesn't necessarily make logical sense. It's also very dangerous, but it's almost showing the essence of the greatness of what we can all be. And I guess that's why we find that fascinating, that someone's willing to do that, risk their life, to just try to accomplish this thing. And it's so pure in that sense, because he walks up the mountain and he walks back out, and there's not machines, and there's no teams, and there's no medals.
Yeah.
He's just kind of doing it.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that, the film's about a lot of different things. It's about facing your fears. It's about courage. It's about, vulnerability and connecting with people. But it's also about human potential. And it's, Alex is, this act of free soloing is a very visceral way to kind of understand and experience, the greatness of human potential. And also it's about excellence and perfection, and dedication and hard work, and how through hard work you can achieve anything. It wasn't just given to him, he had to really work for it, even though he's extraordinary and talented. And I think that that's something people connect with. And I also think in this day and age where nobody seems to be who they are, and it's there's a lot of kind of posturing, and this is who I am on social media, and this is nobody knows what is real anymore. But this is real, and this is a very real person doing something very real, and he's not even claiming it. He's doing it because he's being true to himself.
Right. And that's the thing, he's going up there for his own motivations. He's not going up there for the show.
No, I mean, you don't become a professional rock climber to become famous or to make money. There's a lot of much easier ways to do that. And it is pure. Like, he is doing it because it's what he loves and it's what he's passionate about. And I think it's nice to see somebody who finds deep meaning and purpose in something. And, you know, I think it comes across pretty clearly that Alex's intentions with what he does are very pure.
Yeah. For people that don't understand the concept of free soloing, can you kind of walk through maybe even, you know, kind of a brief history, and then also kind of how epic it is for Alex to do something like this? Because I've heard a line that if you don't know much about climbing, it's pretty epic. But if you actually know anything about climbing, it's like 10x that.
Yeah.
Because then you really understand
Yeah.
how mind-blowing it is, risky, crazy, et cetera.
No, for sure. I mean, I think mainstream audiences, when they see free soloing, they're like, well, he's a professional, but he's crazy, but he's probably okay. You know, it's hard for them to kind of, you know, contextualize what he's doing. But when you're a climber and you know how big El Cap is and you know how difficult the climbing is, that really freaks you out. Because, you know, before Alex, nobody ever seriously considered or talked about free soloing El Cap. You know, it just was so far beyond what people were imagining that it wasn't even part of the conversation. You know, it's kind of futuristic. You know, I kind of relate it to as if, like, you know, people keep talking about breaking the 2-hour marathon, you know, and, you know, that's kind of like a lot of talk. Someday somebody's going to break the 2-hour barrier on the marathon, and then someone shows up and runs the sub 1 hour marathon. And people are like, well, we weren't even talking about the sub 1 hour. We were talking about the sub 2 hour. You know, I mean, it's such a leap to what people were talking about or thinking about. You know, it's just like another level. But free soloing has been around probably since climbing started, you know. But free soloing at a very cutting edge level is, you know, there have been a few great free soloists. It's not a common pursuit to do cutting edge free soloing. I think a lot of climbers free solo. I've free soloed, and I will continue to free solo on relatively easy terrain for me. But to do it at the cutting edge, where the technical difficulties are very hard and it's like huge formations, yeah, very, very few people have gone down that path. It's perfection or death, you know, so the stakes are very high, and it's such a mental game, because a lot of the cutting edge free solos aren't cutting edge climbs if you had a rope on. Right. But you take away the rope. So I'm saying, like, physically the climbs could be really difficult, but it's the capacity to manage fear, to have absolute control over your mind. That is the superpower. That is like the challenge, is to have absolute control, like not letting your mind slip. And you're controlling one of the most base instincts of falling, where it's kind of something, it's not like you can ignore it. You have to be, because it's so obvious, you know, you're 1,000 feet off the ground with no rope, holding onto holds that are the size of, you know, a coin on edge, you know, like microscopic holds. It's pretty incredible.
I'm getting scared just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so free soloing is already scary, and now there's a new sport called free soloing movie making. So then you put a lens on him at the same time.
Really terrifying.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to get into the making of the movie, but look, Alex was on my radar for like the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Like we kind of knew about him, but when he free soloed Half Dome is when, you know, that this talk started, right?
Yes.
And he did a TED Talk about that experience recently, and he said that that experience kind of scared him because when he did it, he wasn't as prepared mentally as he wanted to be. And I think he said he stopped free soloing for a year. You tell me about when you first, knew that he did that, and when he first did that piece, and then what he learned from that, because I think he learned that he needed to be perfect.
Yes, he learned that his assumptions around how to free solo big walls wasn't accurate, and I'll go into that in a minute. But Alex came onto my radar when I heard that he had free soloed Moonlight Buttress in Zion, and then followed up with Half Dome. Both of those climbs are fairly significant achievements to climb with a rope. So climbing it without a rope was mind-blowing to the degree that when I first found out about it, I was like, there's no way he did that. I'm like, there's no way. Like, who is this guy? Never really heard of him before. He kind of came up out of nowhere. And I had to really, check around to verify.
How do you verify something like that?
Well, there's a peer group, we at the upper echelon of the climbing world, there's people who you trust and know, of their opinions, where they were like, I wasn't there, I've seen him climb, he's the real deal.
It's a very funny subculture.
Yes.
Elite climbers.
Yeah. I mean, like any elite
subculture.
Okay. It's a small world.
Reputation's everything.
Reputation, street cred, all of that. And Alex has street cred for days, millenniums.
Why?
Because he is a purist. He's a climber's climber kind of thing. He is just passionate about climbing, loves climbing, can't live without climbing. His climbing comes from, the heart, and he's not like, he doesn't claim stuff. He's very kind of reticent and low key, but just loves climbing, and we all know that. He lives for climbing, and we understand that because we're the same way. I love climbing. I live to climb and to ski and to be outside, and it's like our therapy. It's like what we do. But
you say therapy. Do you guys have demons inside you?
I don't. It's funny because I think some people climb for a lot of different reasons, and people do a lot of different things for a lot of different reasons. I think one of the big appeals about climbing is that it forces you to be very, very present. And I think that, especially in this day and age, we've lost so much of that. We're just constantly distracted and like flipping through our phones, and whether it's for social media or dating or work or emails. You're just bombarded by media and all this stuff. It's like hard to be present in the moment with other people too. Like climbing is a great way to like really have an experience with somebody, right? Because you're sharing an experience that isn't digital. It's like very analog. You're like out there. You're very real consequences to your actions and your decisions, and those are things that I think that we, are based kind of, that we need, and that we miss. And so I think that that's a big part of why we climb, is to that feeling of being really present and in the moment.
Ultra present. It's almost like the best drug ever, being ultra present.
Yeah. You're forced to. And you're also constantly being challenged in this way where you have to face your fear. You have to overcome a fear, like, by moving up. And the further up you move, the higher you are off the ground, the more exposure and you're kind of like battling your own instincts, and overcoming fear. And overcoming fear is this great experience. I think that it builds a lot of self-confidence and is satisfying in a deep way. So every day you go out there and you're challenging yourself and you're trying to, make these moves, and so it's, I think, very therapeutic. Yeah.
And what about those demons?
And then there are demons, and they're, those can stem from anywhere, as we all know. But, I think that Alex, certainly, like everybody, has some demons, conscious or subconscious. But at the end of the day, I think that he just loves the movement and everything else that climbing does for you.
I mean, you obviously went into his childhood and his parents, and having his girlfriend there, the love interest, was a really good tool, because otherwise I don't think you could never gotten inside of his head, I think, without.
Yeah, no, I mean, we definitely thought this is much better than shooting a lone guy sitting in his van for 2 years.
Part of me wants to see that movie too.
Yes.
I'll be honest.
Okay,
Part of me wanted to see
maybe.
the guy's movie too. But.
Yeah, but it made it much, much more interesting. It gave it a lot more emotional depth. And Sani really brought something out in Alex. I mean, here's this young, beautiful, vibrant young woman who is very emotionally articulate and very emotionally aware. And in some ways, she's on kind of this side of the spectrum, and he's on this side of the spectrum, someone who's has a very hard time connecting with people, doesn't really have a language, whether that's kind of like physical or verbal. He didn't know how to hug for a long time. He had to like teach himself how to hug.
And you were one of the early victims of some of the bad hugs he gave, right?
Yeah, actually, it was really funny. When we first met him, he used to do this hug where he would put his arms around, wouldn't really touch you, and you'd feel him pat you in the middle of the back. And it wasn't a real hug.
That's the way my son hugs me, because he doesn't know how to hug either, but he's watched us hug.
Yeah.
So he gives me like this.
Yeah. No. Now it's like the 2-arm, heart to heart, like, that's a real hug, right? And
so he's learning this new language.
Yeah, with Sani, and Sani's really kind of teaching him another form of communication. And she is self-confident enough to, tell him what she's comfortable with and not comfortable with, but she's also very open about the fact that, she still loves him for who he is, and she gives him the space to be who he is, but she's articulate and self-confident enough to say, but this is what I need, And I thought that was, I really respected that about Sani, and that I still respect about her. She is also very much a go-getter. Like she is very intentional in the way that she lives, and that's like Alex. In those ways, they're very similar. They've both thought about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they want to live their lives. Yeah. And I think that's great.
And you're close with Alex. I mean, you guys are hugging in the movie, but at one point you said something like Spock has emotions, or something.
Yeah, we have nicknames for him.
Okay.
Everything from the monk, because he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. He lives like a very clean lifestyle. We call him No Big Deal Honnold, because nothing is a big deal to him. And sometimes, that works both for what he's done, but sometimes, like, if you've done something that you feel like is really awesome or that you're really happy about, he can also be like, that's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
So and we love him for it, because he is who he is, but we give him a hard time about it. We'll be like, that was really hard for me. It might not have been hard for you, but like, that's a big deal for me. And he'll be like, that's not a big deal. But then, we also call him Spock, highly calculated, very objective, non-emotional, lives in like, if there's an emotional scale of 1 to 10, he lives between like 4.9 and 5.1. And 5.2 in a scale of 1 to 10 would be like very excited for Alex,
Right.
So he's like straight down the middle.
And when he finishes El Capitan at the end and he says, "I'm delighted," what's that for Alex? Is that like a 6?
That was like a 5.8, He
Okay.
says, "I'm so delighted." And people always laugh because they're like, you'd imagine if you pull it off, you'd be like jumping up and down, be like, "I can't believe I did it." But, or crying or bursting into tears, and he says that. He's like, "I think the movie would be better if I burst into tears, but I don't really feel like it."
Yeah. Is that the only way someone can perform this feat of climbing up a 3,000-foot vertical granite wall with no ropes? Do you think it takes a Spock-like or monk-like?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were to kind of try to pinpoint his superpower, it would be the fact that he is able to control his mind absolutely in this non-emotive way. To be able to take one of the most basic instincts of fear and fear of falling and being in that position and being able to intellectualize it and say, well, fear right now is not going to serve me, so I'm going to take that and put it over here.
Right.
And then now I'm going to have to, and it's not going to serve me executing perfectly, and I'm going to execute perfectly right now.
Right. Right. Which is what all of you climbers do. He's
Well,
just doing it in a highly, highly intense situation.
Yeah, where the
Lot-
stakes are, the stakes do not get any higher, right? And I think it's incredible because I think it's like what every athlete or you could be a lawyer or a doctor, or anybody who has to perform under high pressure situations. That's kind of like the dream scenario where you're in a situation and the stakes are as high as they get, and you know that you're going to execute perfectly. How great would that be? To know, I think that has a lot of appeal, especially for athletes, if you're a basketball player or football player and it's the Super Bowl or the NBA championships, and to go in there and being like, I'm going to play the perfect game.
Right. And that's why this movie's doing so well, because we're watching that and thinking, wow, I would love to channel that. Or I'd love to get in touch with my Vulcan side.
Yeah, and be able to like do whatever it is that I've always thought was impossible, but do it perfectly and be able to pull it off.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you're, 18,000 feet, getting froze to death on Meru,
Yeah.
You're doing a little bit of that stuff too.
So I can appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what always makes me laugh is like this weird subculture of elite climbers, like I guess you and Alex and some of these other guys. These really quiet, soft-spoken kind of badasses. You lived through avalanches. Anybody watched Meru? You're up there, really dealing with the situation that is deteriorating fast. If we don't make the correct decisions, we're going to die. We're going to lose people. Do you ever think about those two contrasts to your character?
Yeah, I think the climbing culture is in general very understated. It doesn't, at least old school, like our mentors and the people that I looked up to, it was all about understatement and not bragging, And I think also that comes from the fact that climbing can be very humbling, and the mountains can be very humbling, and the stakes are also very real. And so I think I can't tell if it's chicken or the egg thing, if it kind of necessarily draws people who are more understated and cerebral and calculated, or if it makes you, it's probably a combination of the two, but climbing is so humbling. And there's always a better climber than you, And I'm surrounded by incredible climbers, so I always feel like unworthy. Like I'm not worthy. But yeah, I think it's the culture. The culture is very understated.
Right. So you kind of noticed that Alex free soloed Half Dome. You kind of verified it. You know, you start to get to know him, and then this whole project kind of dropped out of nowhere, right? You and your wife never went in thinking we're going to make this movie about this thing, right?
Yes, we didn't. We didn't know. We had talked about making a film about Alex as a character study, and a portrait of this character who, you know, before he ever talked about climbing El Cap, everything he'd done previous to that was already noteworthy enough to make a film. And him as a character was already interesting enough to make a documentary about. But it wasn't until we started talking to him about it that he told us that he wanted to free solo El Cap. And that's, you know, it was a funny story because I've known Alex for 10 years and I've climbed with him all over the world. I don't even know how many trips I've been on with him, but, you know, and I filmed with him and shot photos of him, and I shot a cover for National Geographic of Alex in 2010.
On Half Dome, right?
Yes, on Half Dome. And then subsequently, we just got this month's cover story as well.
Wow.
So my only 2 covers are of Alex, one on Half Dome and one on
And you were
El
shooting
Cap.
stills on that final climb.
Yes.
That's crazy. We'll talk about that. So
Yeah,
you're doing
we'll talk
film
about that.
and stills on the one climb.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, we only have
You're
one
underpaid.
chance. Yeah.
If Nat Geo's listening, you're underpaid.
But, you know, he's hadn't told me. So basically, you know, we talked about making this film about Alex, and then my wife. So I've been climbing with him, like I said, for 10 years. I've known him very well, and my wife didn't know him very well. So she said, "Okay, you know what? I need to spend some time with him and kind of, you know, suss him out and kind of size him up and see if he'll be a good character for a feature-length film. It's you got to have some depth and something there." And so
even MERU, you didn't start off shooting as a feature film. You kind of shot
we
that
backed
and
into
it, right?
Yeah.
So this would have. So you really have to think about this.
Yeah. So we had a lot more intention going into this film, and then she went out with Alex, and he came out to New York, and they hung out for a while, and then, you know, he told her, "Well, I'm thinking about free soloing El Cap." And Chai, not being a climber, you know, she's from Manhattan, born and raised on the Upper East Side, you know, academic, highly accomplished nonfiction filmmaker. She was like, "That sounds great. That's a great focal point for the film, and you know, that'd be a great journey." And so when I called her and said, "How'd your meeting with Alex go?" She was like, "Oh, it was great. He said he's gonna free solo El Cap." And I was like, "What? We can't. I don't know if we can make that film, you know." And so, and I explained to her kind of the gravity of it, and she trusts me on that. You know, she's
Why
like,
did you say that? I don't know if we can make that film.
because I knew what the burden would feel like.
Which is what?
That someone could die on your watch, and that there was the potential of the filmmaking causing him to die. Like, that was one of many potentials. But, you know, being a climber, being a producer, being a director, I mean, you think about worst case scenarios and how to plan for them and how to mitigate them, the risks around them. And so I was just not sure that I wanted to carry that burden for 2 years. And so we took 6 months off, and I was having a conversation. We literally stopped everything, development. We were like, we need to think about it. So we're wrestling with the questions that are actually in the film, you know, like if, you know, whether us being there might cause him to fall.
Right. You mentioned something, I think, in another interview called Kodak Courage.
Yeah.
And what is that for people that don't
Well,
understand?
Kodak Courage is, you know, back in the day when you shot Kodak film, where you'd point the camera and someone would do something that they wouldn't normally do because you're, you know, pointing a camera at them. The classic one is skiers jumping off a much bigger cliff than they thought they were going to jump off of, because they're like, oh, they're filming or they're shooting. I'm going to jump off the biggest cliff I can find. And, you know, I mean, that's called Kodak courage.
And you've seen that happen, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've seen that happen, but I wasn't so worried about Alex, because Alex is kind of distinctly kind of
Vulcan.
Yeah, he handles external pressure very well. Like, external factors affect him a lot less than most people, if at all, because he doesn't care. It just doesn't matter to him. You know, it doesn't matter what people think about him. You know, he's eating off the spatula because he's like, I don't care. He says certain things because he's like, I don't care. You know, they might not be the nicest way to say them, but it's the most direct path from A to B in terms of communicating what I'm trying to say.
Right.
You know?
Got it.
I mean, it's about efficiency.
Yeah. It's important if you're a climber.
Yes. But we took 6 months off trying to decide, you know, and I mean, the real question is whether or not we trusted Alex in making good decisions, like that he would make the right decision, or that he would never go if he didn't feel like he was ready. And I'd seen him over the years make very calculated decisions. And I knew he wasn't a daredevil. I knew he wasn't there doing things to make money or to become famous or infamous. I knew that his intentions were in the right place. And really, it came down to a conversation I had with my good friend, John Krakauer, the author, who's a good friend and mentor. And like all great mentors, I asked him the question, and then he asked me a series of questions to answer my question.
And what were some of those questions?
Made me answer my own questions.
Right.
Well, he said, you know, well, is he going to do it anyways, whether you're there or not? And I said, yes. He's like, well, do you think it's a story worth telling? I was like, yes. He's like, well, who do you think has the best working relationship with him and that is going to be able to tell the story the best? And I was like, okay, fine.
And then who also is able to shoot it on top of that?
And so it was literally the day after that conversation I had with John. It was basically, I needed a little bit more validation from my peer group as well. And I called Conrad about it too, because I wasn't even sure if it was okay. And I was like, is this even okay ethically? And to have Conrad and John both be like, you know, that's worthy, and like, this is the right thing, and we get it. You know, maybe not everybody is gonna get it, you know, because filmmaking, there's also the intention of the filmmaking, you know, that can be judged.
Yeah.
And can be judged harshly. Are you trying to make a snuff film? Or like, you know, what are you trying to do here? Or you're getting paid to do this, and like, you know, what if he dies? And like, but that one not so much, because you're like, well, documentary films is not exactly the way to go make money.
Right, not until now.
You know, you don't go into documentaries because of the money.
Right, that's true. And what would you have done if something bad had happened on that mountain?
Well, we talked a lot about that, because we had to address that before we even moved into the film.
Right.
And it's hard to say. I mean, we knew that we were making a film that was about Alex and to celebrate who he was and, you know, his legacy, and also this incredible, extraordinary person that, you know, symbolized or was emblematic of all these like attributes that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And he had an incredible story, you know. But I think it would have been really, really difficult to make the film, but I think we would have ended up making it. And that's what we talked about. But we always said, you know, you never know how you'll react to something like that. So you kind of have to cross that bridge if you ever get to it.
Right.
Because it's hard to say if I'd ever be able to look through a camera again, or it's hard to say if I could have possibly move forward with it, or if it just didn't feel right and you don't know what, you have to listen to your heart, and until you're in that situation, it's hard to really, really know.